Hello, everybody. Obviously, as you guys probably figured out, you just completed the scavenger hunt. So we're starting our 1920s unit. This is one of my favorite units to teach. I wish we had more time to kind of to really focus on it, but I hope you enjoy it. So you guys should have guided notes at this point. After scavenger hunt, you're going to be listening. You should be listening to this with your headphones. So here's some kind of some goals, some things to kind of look at. America after World War One. This is really the ultimate. Where a lot of changes are going to occur, foreign policy and domestic, and we'll get to that through the course of the unit. But one of the things I really want you guys to focus on is how will America change after fighting the war? You got millions of men coming home after the war, and how is it going to change the economy? How's it going to change technology in the 20s? How will technology impact how businesses operate, how people live? Women had a vital role during World War One. So, what are some going to be some changes, both good and bad, for women during this time? Again, what's the impact of the soldiers going to have when they come home? How's that going to affect the economy? As well as some other things as well as we'll get to entertainment as well. How is that going to change during this time? And eventually, one of the things I want you kind of the underlying thing I want you guys to focus on is what led to the Great Depression. The Great Depression is going to hit in 1929 at the end of the 20s. So what were some things that maybe led to that? So really focus on that over the next couple weeks. All right, so the 20s, what is it called? The 20s had a lot of nicknames. One is the Roaring 20s. Think about what it sounds like, roaring. Things were good. The economy was booming. People were having a good time. So you see, like, the Yankees and Babe Ruth here. Baseball got really big in the 20s, and really Babe Ruth put the Yankees and baseball on the map. So that was one obviously big thing with Babe Ruth calling his shot. He was an instant star, an instant icon for the sport. I don't know if you ever heard, the Sultan of SWAT, the King of Crash, the Great Bambino, if you watched The Sandlot. So Babe Ruth was a huge, like larger than life figure during this time. You have the advent of movie theaters. Now the first theaters were kind of weird. It's like they had like no talking in there. It was just silent movies. But at the time, this was a groundbreaking technology. You go to the theater. Um, watch the silent movie, and eventually by the end of the decade, they will have the first talking movies. So technology, more entertainment is going to be around, and you have like really the cars. Now cars were around before the 20s, but the reason why I kind of have it in here is because during the 20s, cars were more affordable. The average American could afford it. Cars were so cheap at that point, where almost anybody really had one. And then obviously women, a lot more freedom. You see with their fashion and a lot more independent because of their contributions during the war. So the 20s is going to be a step in the right direction for women. Not completely, but at least it's taking slow baby steps as we'll kind of get to over the course of the unit. Again, more entertainment wise. Again, more people had more things to do. They had more time to do things. A lot of it was technology was more efficient, but also labor unions. And employers. A lot of states were passing labor laws that allowed, a limit to the workday. So more people had money and they had more time. So flagpole sitting, guy sitting on a flagpole had a seat on the pole. He would sit there. I think he sat there for 46 hours. So just things to do. You go dance, go to the theater, go to a baseball game. So again, a lot more things to do and time on their hands. Walt Disney kind of got to start in the 20s, and now I don't want to give too much away because this will be one of your guys' project things that you'll be doing. But Walt Disney, he failed several times before he made it big. So kind of one of those feel good stories, kind of coming from nothing and making something of himself. So obviously he hit big with Mickey Mouse and Steamboat Willie was the first cartoon. So anyway, you have that. Notre Dame, college football, the Four Horsemen. College football really got big, in the idea of Notre Dame football also was big. So sports, again, people have more time to watch or to listen to the game, more leisure time. So that will also add to sports. Baseball, football start growing as well. And obviously you have partying, a lot more time wanting to spend on alcohol and going out. So we'll talk more about that here in a little bit, though. Stunt devils going on top of airplanes and performing acts. People were amazed by that. This is when airplanes kind of became more mainstream. We talk about that just during World War I. Airplanes were more prevalent. So um, the airplanes were put to use outside of war for leisurely flying or stunt doubles as well. Again, as I mentioned, here's some movies. Charlie Chaplin was big at this time. You see 50 cents, a dollar would be there all day. So just kind of interesting stuff you can do. 10 cent for this movie. Billy the Kid. So just different things that came out during the 20s that was very popular. Also, other big nickname for the 20s was the Jazz Age. Jazz was a big deal. As we'll talk about, a lot of African Americans will leave the South and they'll go north for a variety of reasons. One, because of the war. So a lot more factory jobs that were available. So as they leave the South, go north, they take their culture, traditions, music, jazz came to be a big deal. One of the biggest jazz clubs was known as the Cotton Club, very popular amongst white Americans as well as African Americans. Louis Armstrong was arguably one of the greatest jazz players, the trumpet players of all time. Played there. Duke Ellington, Cab Calloway, basically anybody who was anybody played there. There was a really popular place in Harlem, New York. Now, some of the negative side, one of the names of the 20s was also known as the Age of Intolerance. You did have a lot of nativism, racism, groups that were forming or had already formed. You start seeing a large spike in membership of the KKK, not only in the South, but in the Midwest, Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, places like that, because again, more African Americans are moving from south to north. So you're going to start seeing a lot more of these nativist groups and hate groups forming and spreading. Um, you have women were fighting for their right to vote and fighting for freedoms. And again, that came with a price, as we'll show you guys with a video later on. All right, so for foreign policy, the 20s was dominated by Republican presidents. Warren G. Harding is an Ohio president. He was elected after Woodrow Wilson, and he campaigned on the promise to return back to normalcy, that after the war, things were going to go back to normal, and that's what he campaigned on. He promised that he would keep the country isolated from foreign affairs. Again, after World War I, there became a lot of questions about whether or not we should be entering another, large-scale war or to get our nose involved in a European or Asian war. So he promised that we were going to, maintain an isolationist policy, stay isolated from the world in terms of military affairs. He believed that the military had no business being in Europe. This is also remember from the last unit. This is also be one of the major reasons why we are not going to join the League of Nations that Woodrow Wilson will create, but we're not going to join it because of isolationism. Most Americans will support isolationism after the war. They saw what the money was spent, the amount of destruction that was, inflicted on our soldiers. We want no part of that again. All right, so some themes of the 20s. One of the things, especially in the beginning part of the 20s, was a strong economy. As I mentioned earlier, labor unions started getting some victories. States and progressives started being influential in government, started passing laws to limit work days and minimum wage laws and safety laws. There was a strong economy in the beginning part of the 20s. Also, you started seeing a huge rise in the middle class. A lot more middle class jobs were becoming available. Again, due to unions fighting for higher wages, but you also had some managerial roles, and you had advertisements, as you guys see here. Those are middle class jobs. Mechanics for cars were in huge demand. So people had more money to spend, more money in their pockets, and more time to be able to enjoy life. But also, in terms of more time, they're also to do with the amount of technology that was around during the 20s that wasn't around before, that gave Americans more time. So, like, for instance, the auto industry was huge. This will create 1 million jobs during the 20s because they were building all the roads. As more people were on the road, they needed roads. So they made about 400,000 miles worth of roads in the early part of the 20s that will also create a lot of jobs, not only making the cars, but also in the road process and mechanics. This will also impact the sports industry. People have cars, they can go to a game. That will create jobs too. Movies and entertainment, people have more money and they can actually drive to the movie theater. Same for restaurants. They have a car. They can go to a restaurant now. That'll give restaurants more business. Department stores, again, they have cars. They can create malls, so you can go buy clothes and go buy other householdly goods. So all those the car had a huge impact on a lot of these industries beginning to grow, and all these things also are going to create jobs. But also you need to figure out ways to advertise and market these things. So again, advertisements. You're going to advertise your products. Now, also in the 20s, you have the invention of the radio. Again, that will be a huge job creator. But also for business, now you can advertise your goods not only in the newspaper but also on the radio as well. And you start seeing some other products like vacuums were developed, and refrigerators, and washing machines, and waffle makers. So all those things are going to be nice convenience items that are going to, especially vacuum cleaners. You now can have a machine now clean your house, to where you no longer had to do that by hand anymore. Same with washer and dryers. You can now put that machine in to wash your clothes. So that saves you time. Let's get that. All right, so rise in consumerism. What is consumerism? It's what we, as consumers, it's us that go out and spend our money. So obviously, if we have more money in their pockets during the 20s, more middle class jobs, people are going to spend their money. They're going to buy things that for their homes or for their personal well-being. So due to the middle class, people had more income to spend on these items, on houses. So the average home back then was $3,000. Now again, that was a lot of money back then. But people had more money to buy a home. A radio, you could buy a radio for $60. Again, as a convenience item, but people have more money to spend. Stove, $72. They can go spend money on a baseball game or go to a theater. So now with that being said, some of these things like homes, people in radios and stoves, sometimes people didn't want to spend all their money in one. So what was an option? Credit, credit card or purchase credit. So people started paying with credit. Now, that's both good and bad. It's bad in the fact that sometimes people aren't good they just buy, and they start racking up their credit debt. That can get you into some trouble. So keep that in mind for stock market crash. People start using a lot of credit. Banks are lending a lot of money to people. And when people start losing their jobs, can they pay back their debt? No! So that would be a huge, huge problem. Obviously, you don't need to write this down, but occupations back then, just some different, stats about kind of what people made. The average person made about $1,000 a year, $1,500 a year, so it wasn't a ton. So credit was a big way to get some of these modern convenience items like vacuum cleaners and stoves and things of that nature. So you just kind of see some more advertisements. Again, here, all these things were, good middle-class jobs. Good people would do this and put these in the newspapers, selling vacuum cleaners and things of that nature. Refrigerator, you kind of see the price right here, $119 to $259, so you kind of see that. Also, kids. You start getting some, the child industry in terms of making children toys. Again, people have more money to spend, that will allow for the children's toy industry, job creator, to start booming as well. As I said before, the Model T car, Henry Ford, as I said, most people had access to a car in the 20s. $290, you can take credit for that. So 1 in 5 people had a car at this time. But again, I can't underestimate enough how big the car industry had on the economy back in this time. It created so many jobs. Not just in the car industry, but again, fast food, restaurants, malls were able to develop sports, etc. All right, so that is it for today. You should have all this stuff written down into your guided notes, and yeah, you can go on to the next thing. Toodles.